The fight for Iwo Jima lasted 36 brutal days. On March 26, 1945, Marines leaving the island called it secure. But the island was not empty. About 3,000 Japanese soldiers had crawled into a vast underground network and would not give up. Clearing those tunnels became the job of the U.S. Army's 147th Infantry Regiment. When people picture American troops hunting enemies in tight underground passages, they usually think of Vietnam's tunnel rats. More than 20 years earlier, though, the 147th nicknamed themselves the Cavemen while doing the same kind of work on Iwo Jima. They quickly learned the island was far more dangerous and strange than it looked from the surface. Iwo Jima is a small, strange place of black volcanic sand and hidden dangers. What everyone remembers most is how fiercely the Marines fought there. Capturing the island was a major moment and gave the world Joe Rosenthal's famous photo of Marines raising the flag on Mount Suribachi. Of the 83 medals of honor the Marines earned in World War II, 22 were for actions on Iwo Jima. The name Iwo still sparks deep pride among Marines. About 6,800 Marines died there, and roughly 3 times that number were wounded. The roughly 26,000 total casualties make Iwo the only battle in that war where Marine losses outnumbered Japanese losses. The Marines' percentage of loss at Iwo was even higher than American losses on D-Day. Admiral Chester Nimitz summed it up. Uncommon valor was a common virtue. Those words fit the Army soldiers too, though many people don't know the Army fought on Iwo as well. To understand their role, you have to look beneath the island's surface. Japanese General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had ordered a huge system of tunnels and caves dug under both the north and south sides. That underground maze held more than 1,500 rooms and gave stubborn Japanese troops almost endless places to hide. Marine commanders guessed only 100 to 300 Japanese remained underground and ready to keep fighting in spring 1945. The real number was about 10 times larger. Still, American leaders thought one Army regiment could hold Iwo and finish off a few hundred beaten enemy soldiers who had slipped below. The plan was treated as a routine mop-up after the Marines were pulled off the island to rest and prepare for the next invasion. The Army's 147th was chosen to do that job. Many forget that Marines and Army soldiers often fought together in the Pacific. Mixed teams called CAM, Composite Army Marine Units, were used several times in the campaign. It wasn't a new idea. Soldiers and Marines had fought side by side as far back as the Battle of Princeton on January 3, 1777, and they would fight together many times in World War. Iwo Jima became another CAM operation, though that fact is rarely mentioned. The 147th came to be known as the Gypsies of the Pacific, a name used by Tom McLeod in his unofficial history Always Ready, the story of the United States 147th Infantry Regiment. McLeod is now curator of the Museum of the Pacific in Texas, and his father, Captain Prentice R. McLeod, served in the unit. The 147th had originally been part of the 37th Buckeye Infantry Division from the Ohio National Guard, with most men from Cincinnati and Southwest Ohio. The 37th arrived in Fiji in April 1942 to garrison the islands. That same year, the Army reorganized divisions from 4 regiments down to 3, keeping the 129th, 145th, and 148th in the 37th, and leaving the 147th without a division. The Army quickly sent the 147th where it was needed most, to Guadalcanal. The Marines had landed there on August 7, 1942, and Admiral William Bull Halsey ordered the 147th to Guadalcanal on October 20, 1942. After the Japanese left the island in February 1943, the 147th stayed behind to mop up remaining enemy soldiers. On Guadalcanal, the soldiers of the 147th learned the hard way that fighting an enemy hidden in caves and tunnels was unlike any other kind of combat. It was close, terrifying, and personal. Japanese defenders refused to surrender, waiting in dark passageways and firing from hidden cracks in the rocks. To deal with them, the men developed new methods. 2-man teams carried flamethrowers to send fire deep into the caves, earning the name blowtorch teams. 3-man groups armed with a Browning, automatic rifle, and satchel charges were called corkscrew teams. because they could blast and burn their way into even the most stubborn hiding places. These tactics became their trademark, and they would use them again and again throughout the Pacific. The regiment was officially separated from the 37th Division on July 31, 1943. From then until March 1945, the 147th moved from island to island, guarding Samoa, New Caledonia, and Emerau before returning to New Caledonia. These postings might have seemed routine, but Colonel William B. Tuttle Jr. kept the men constantly training. Every single day, soldiers practiced with flamethrowers and explosives. Cooks, clerks, and anyone not usually on the front line were also trained on Japanese rifles, grenades, and machine guns. Tuttle believed that in the Pacific, every man had to be ready for combat at a moment's notice, no matter what his original job was. His strict training meant that when the time came, the regiment could act as a well-oiled machine. By the end of 1944, a new commander, Colonel Robert F. Johnson, took charge. He told the men they were about to head into Tojo's front yard, a clear sign that the coming mission would take them closer to Japan itself. The exact location was still secret, but everyone understood it would be deadly. The problem was that the unit had lost nearly half of its most seasoned fighters due to troop rotations, and many new men had little or no combat experience. Johnson had to rebuild his regiment almost from scratch. He ordered intense crash courses in amphibious landings, jungle warfare, and shooting skills. The men drilled until exhaustion, knowing that whatever awaited them, they had to be prepared. On February 24, 1945, the 147th began boarding transport ships. 8 days later, they sailed for Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Eniwetok had already been taken by the Marines the year before and was being used as a massive staging area for the assault on Iwo Jima. The 147th was now Task Unit 11.1.2, a full combat force of 3 battalions with about 3,000 men, plus an anti-tank company, a cannon company, and headquarters support. They reached Eniwetok on March 14th and were told they would remain there until the end of the month before moving to Iwo. But fate changed their path almost immediately. The same day, Colonel Johnson was handed new orders demanding that his regiment leave for Iwo Jima at the earliest practicable date. Instead of a short rest, the men were heading into battle almost at once. Attached to the 3rd Marine Division, the soldiers now knew exactly where they were going. By the time they sailed out, every man was aware of Iwo Jima's reputation, the horrors waiting there, and how desperate the fight still was. On March 20th, 1945, at about 1:30 in the afternoon, the 147th arrived off Iwo Jima's coast. From their ships, they could see the island's black sand beaches, still smoldering from weeks of bombardment, and smell the acrid stench of smoke and death. 2 years earlier, the 147th had stood shoulder to shoulder with Marines on Guadalcanal, and later they had guarded Emerau with them. Now they were once again following in the footsteps of the Marines, chosen because few units were better suited for this kind of work. The men came ashore at dawn on March 21st at a landing zone called Purple Beach. Gunfire and explosions were still echoing in the distance, since the northern part of the island had not yet been cleared. The regiment gathered near Airfield No. 2, ready for orders. At first, their assignment was to hold the coastline and then take over garrison duty, cleaning up small groups of enemy survivors and securing the area. But once they reached the island, their mission shifted. Instead of waiting for stragglers, they were told to replace elements of the 3rd Marines and step directly into the fight. The dangers became clear almost immediately. On March 30th, a patrol from the 1st Battalion spotted 2 Japanese guards near a cave and killed them. When the Americans cautiously entered, they were stunned by what they found. Inside was not only a fortified hideout, but also a makeshift farm. The cave contained vegetables, chickens, even a couple of cows, along with American medical supplies, weapons, and ammunition. The enemy had survived by stealing whatever they could, and they were not just surviving, they were preparing to keep fighting. To truly secure the island, Colonel Johnson knew they would need more than simple guard duty. He ordered combat patrols to hunt for hidden enemy positions, carefully planned ambushes in which every shot was pre-aimed, and organized cave-clearing missions. Small teams began going underground to fight the Japanese directly, later proudly calling themselves cavemen. James McGuire of Bravo Company said these groups carried little more than courage. flashlights and pistols into the darkness. James Ahern of Fox Company remembered how clever the Japanese were at defending their positions. Snipers covered cave openings, ready to shoot anyone who approached, and if grenades were thrown in, another soldier often caught them and hurled them back. McGuire himself was twice wounded in a single attack when the Japanese returned both his phosphorus and fragmentation grenades. Only after he called in a flamethrower team was the cave finally silenced. The fighting on Iwo Jima was unlike anything most soldiers had ever experienced. The Americans had to deal with a determined enemy who refused to surrender, and instead hid in tunnels, caves, and bunkers deep within the volcanic island. To root them out, U.S. troops sometimes used flamethrowers, forcing the Japanese to retreat further inside their hideouts. Once the enemy was trapped, other soldiers had to move up close, tossing grenades or placing satchel charges at the entrances. These methods were cruel and devastating, but they were often the only way to put an end to the fierce resistance. The goal was either to destroy those inside or seal them off forever, a tactic soldiers grimly referred to as corkscrewing. Among the soldiers was Corporal Edward Mervich of the 147th Regiment, who later recalled how their commanders encouraged them to take prisoners whenever possible. Leaders explained that Japanese prisoners could be more useful alive, as they might write letters home to their families describing how fairly they were being treated. The hope was that such messages would weaken Japan's resolve and persuade others not to resist when the homeland was invaded. One remarkable figure was Technical Sergeant Terry Takeshi Doi, a Nisei soldier of Japanese descent. Fluent in the language, he was often helped by Japanese prisoners as he worked to persuade holdouts to give up. Doi showed extraordinary bravery, at times walking into caves unarmed or even stripping off his shirt to prove he carried no weapons. He called out in Japanese, urging his countrymen to surrender and promising them safety. Many listened, and because of his calm persistence, countless lives were spared. His courage earned him the Silver Star for valor. Even so, not every encounter was about compassion. American forces also set traps to stop Japanese soldiers who ventured out at night in search of food and water. They would leave supplies, or items that looked like supplies, unguarded, but these were often booby-trapped or surrounded with hidden explosives. When a small group of Japanese soldiers approached, waiting Americans would unleash a storm of firepower on the area, leaving little chance of survival. Tsurugi Akikusa, a Japanese radio man, once went out with such a party, but became separated from his comrades. Hungry and desperate, he stumbled upon American supplies. He was unfamiliar with Coca-Cola, but when he discovered a case of it, he drank until he was sick. Later, he would remember the sweet, fizzy taste as the most delicious thing he had ever experienced. A small, ironic comfort in the middle of horror. As the weeks went by, Japanese survivors became even more desperate. With food and water running out, some soldiers turned against each other, killing their own comrades for a chance at survival. Ensign Satoru Omagari, who lived through these desperate days, confessed that the experience shattered his faith in humanity. He admitted that he found no honor or glory in the battle, only misery and despair. By early April 1945, the 9th Marines withdrew, leaving the 147th Regiment in control of the island. By March 31st, the 147th had reported 387 enemy dead and 17 captured, while suffering only 8 dead and 53 wounded themselves. But the Japanese were not finished. On April 4th, about 200 men emerged from tunnels near the East Boat Basin and launched a surprise assault on an American command post. The battle raged through the night, and during the chaos, a massive explosion of 6,000 cases of dynamite shook the island. By morning, every Japanese attacker was dead. A week later, Captain James Kolb led a patrol that encountered another group of Japanese near a hidden underground hospital. Kolb's men killed one and wounded another, who retreated into the tunnels where over 70 Japanese soldiers remained. Kolb brought in his interpreter, Sergeant Ritsuevo Tanaka, who warned the enemy commander, Major Masaru Inouaka, that their only choices were surrender or death by fire and burial underground. In a rare move, Inouaka asked his men to vote. The majority, 69 out of 72, chose to surrender. One who refused immediately took his own life. This became the largest single surrender on Iwo Jima. Throughout April, the fighting was relentless. The 147th recorded 963 Japanese killed and 664 captured. Patrols, ambushes, and cave-clearing missions continued daily, wearing down what remained of the Japanese defense. By May, more and more soldiers were surrendering. That month, the regiment reported 252 more enemy killed and 186 captured. In early June, Lieutenant James Ahern discovered what appeared to be General Kuribayashi's underground headquarters. When the Japanese inside refused to come out, Lieutenant Joseph Papi Lenoir ordered gasoline pumped into the cave, then set it ablaze. The resulting explosion, fueled by hidden ammunition, shook the area. Astonishingly, 54 Japanese survived the blast and quickly surrendered, but Kuribayashi's body was never found. By the end of June 1945, the battle was largely over. The 147th reported 602 enemy killed and 867 captured between March and June, while suffering only 15 dead and 144 wounded themselves. The true number of Japanese who perished, trapped in tunnels, or incinerated by fire would never be known. Most of the prisoners taken were sent to a camp at Fort Eustis, Virginia, and eventually returned to Japan after the war. Incredibly, 2 holdouts, Matsudo Linsoki and Yamakage Kufuku, remained hidden until January 6, 1949, when they finally surrendered to U.S. Air Force personnel. After the fighting, the 1st Battalion of the 147th was reassigned to the island of Tinian, where they helped protect B-29 bombers preparing for missions that would ultimately drop atomic bombs on Japan. Other parts of the regiment continued to mop up stragglers on Iwo Jima. On May 5th, men from Charlie and Bravo companies explored Minami, a tiny volcanic island nearby. They found nothing but a wrecked Japanese plane and a lone Korean laborer who was quickly taken prisoner. The Americans raised their flag there, a small echo of the more famous flag raising on Iwo Jima. When Japan surrendered in August, the 147th was sent to Okinawa for occupation duty, staying there until December before returning to the United States. On Christmas Day, the regiment was deactivated. In recognition of their service, Lieutenant General Robert C. Richardson praised them for their courage, determination, and resourcefulness in the face of an enemy that refused to give up. He credited their skill and devotion with ensuring the security of a base that had proven vital to the success of the Pacific Campaign.